Our next and last presenter for today, but last but not least, we have Josh Escobar, who is born in Montreal and has lived in Victoria for the past 6 years with his wife and two amazing children. Josh is a person living with BPD and has been a facilitator with the Victoria Peer Support Group through the BPD Society BC and a speaker for awareness presentations since 2024. At first, Josh felt confused about his diagnosis as he didn't know what it was, but ultimately it was a relief. He finally had answers and a better understanding of himself. Growing up, he lacked the love and safety he needed, and for a long time had to navigate the pain of his past alone. With the support of his wife and community, he has learned to face life's challenges. Through peer support and DBT, he gained the tools to regulate his emotions, express himself in healthy ways, and stand up for himself. Josh's journey isn't over, but feels empowered and equipped to become the best version of himself. So I'll hand it over to Josh to share your lived experience.
Thank you, Bailey, and hello, everyone. It's it feels so uplifting to be in a room where people want to hear my story. I grown up in a very invalidating environment, and invalidation is such a huge thing that has affected me negatively. One of the ways that happened was when I was born. Um, I was born in a an environment where my mother had a lot of trauma, and unfortunately she brought that trauma into my life. Of course, not on purpose. She had married someone who was not my father. I don't know who my father is, and but he was very much my father figure. But he abused alcohol and unfortunately was very also abusive towards my mother and I. It created a very difficult environment. Like I said, it was very invalidating. A lot of the answers was, get over it. And there was no space for me to really express myself in any way. There was no room. There was no safe environment. I just had to be quiet, essentially. So with that, I struggled with friendships since I was a child. I don't have any friends from when I was growing up because relationships were tough. They were difficult for me to navigate. They were difficult for me to start, to maintain, and it just kind of continued on all the way into when I was 15 when we moved to Toronto. And I think for anyone, it's difficult to do a big move like that, but then to do it with the undiagnosed of BPD just felt like it was that much more difficult. Um, but I was able to manage somehow. A lot of it was secluding myself off from the world. I was very much an introvert, and I was like that out of safety, so to speak, because I didn't know how to navigate situations, and I wasn't able to be able to really do much of anything. And I actually ended up working in the hospitality industry as a busboy because it was the perfect scenario for me where I could be in an environment, cleaning, bussing tables, and no one would bother me. So for someone who was trying to navigate their emotions, trying to understand them, trying to express them, it was the perfect environment because I was out, but I wasn't really interacting with people. And through that, I kind of used alcohol as a way to numb myself, so I didn't have to face the fact that I was alone, that I was depressed. It was difficult. Being around my family at that time would be difficult because I would be triggered. I didn't know that I was triggered at the time, so I really went into a period in my 20s where I was cut off from everyone, including my family. I had asked them for space. I asked them to um, not talk to me. I didn't do it in that nice of a way, unfortunately. I there was a lot of anger that came out when I asked for that space, which I was grateful for because giving myself that space allowed me to, I didn't have my diagnosis of BPD, but it gave me a space to feel safe and discover who I was for the first time. And from that, I started feeling more confident, and then suddenly, still in hospitality, decided to be a bartender and interacting with people. You think would be this way that I don't know might make me happy, but doing it in the hospitality industry would be really tough. People go in restaurants and can be quite demanding, and that's just how it was. And I kept doing it because I had done it for so long, and I was pretty good at it, and I did enjoy it, but I truly didn't love it. But at that point in my life, I was kind of stuck. I was still very much depressed, but at least I was more out. I was more engaging, and at that time, I think I felt that I was good. I was in a good place, but what it was is that I had just put layers between myself and my BPD symptoms. There was just other layers. It was um, a social life, and I say it in quotations because it was just people who I drank with. People who I wouldn't really necessarily call them friends, but it was people that we would go out, and in a loud nightclub, and that was it. There wasn't much socializing really, but I had that to kind of mask my diagnosis, my undiagnosed of BPD, and I was able to kind of get by. And then it's when at that stage in my life when I met my wife, who we were in Toronto, and truly had um, this moment where I suddenly was like, I think I'm in love with this person, and our relationship really blossomed within a year. She was pregnant with our first, and shortly afterwards we moved to Victoria. And at that stage in my life, I am, as a father, you start thinking, well, I need to kind of move on now from bartending and serving, and try to and want to provide more of a stable life, a life that I didn't have growing up. Like I said, it was very difficult, it was very tough. Someone who abuses alcohol can, you know, gaslights other people. They can, do a lot of deflecting so that they can kind of continue their alcoholism. And I just didn't want to be like that. So I shifted my focus to managing restaurants, and um, with a goal of just kind of being able to provide a steady income. And with that, though, I went from dealing with guests to now dealing with staff members. And with an undiagnosed VPD at the time, that was to say that was difficult. I think is an understatement. I failed miserably um, because I didn't understand how to regulate my emotions. And I didn't understand how to navigate that. Being responsible for people, being a leader, you are very much have to manage expectations, and have to manage people and their emotions and what they're going through. And that was very difficult for me. So I was struggling at work with that, and at that point in time, I had been seeing an RCC previous to that, because my wife had kind of had said to me, I think you need to see someone. And I had always seen people, but looking back in it, I was very much kind of, I think, just going through the motions. I was showing up to a therapy session to say, hey, look, I was here, I was there. Um, but I clearly wasn't doing really much work. I think I was just, kind of doing that to say to myself, like, yeah, everything's fine. You went to therapy. It's okay. And my RCC at the time, she recommended I go to I go to a psychologist for an assessment, which I said neat, and then sat on it for a year. And my wife, who is very supportive and amazing, didn't really say anything about it. She knew about it because I had shared it with her, but she had n- not said anything. And having children, I have two amazing children, like Bailey said at the beginning. Having children brought up to the surface everything that I had not dealt with. It was very easy for me to say, I'm not going to be my mom and her husband. I'm going to be this amazing dad, and I'm going to do all this and that. I didn't hit my children, but the the being short with them, or the black and white thinking, or things like that. I was very much acting like them, like my mother and her husband were, dismissive, invalidating, things like that. And I was saw to myself that I was not being the father that I really wanted to be. I wanted to be one that provided a nurturing, safe environment for my children to simply be children. Um, so that really brought it up to the surface, as well as the struggling that I was doing at work. Um, it it kind of came to a head where I went to see the psychologist, and it was the most terrifying thing ever. Because I think I knew what I was kind of walking. I didn't know what I was walking into really, but I knew that I was walking into something that was going to open myself up and give um, and give me an answer that I was clearly longing for, but was afraid to really ask. So, we paid, my wife paid, actually, not we, but my wife paid. Sorry. So we had spent, or my wife had spent, $1,800 with that. And I only share that monetary part of it because, um, hearing other people's stories of being diagnosed, there is no one I did this and that was it. Everyone seems to have a different story of how they got their diagnosis. And I know that I was very fortunate enough to be able to afford that amount. Or my wife was able to afford that amount because, like Bailey said at the beginning, it was first confusing because I'd never heard of BPD, but it was this aha moment of, when I started researching what BPD was and things like that. I was suddenly like this, oh my gosh, I did do that. Yes. Oh, that is me. And I felt like it was my life story opening up. Um, and it was this weight had really coming off my shoulders. And like I said, because I was a leader and I was struggling at work, I actually shared my diagnosis with my work. And the I shared it with HR, and the reply I got back from HR was that there was a follow up meeting with them afterwards, and and she asked me, the HR woman asked me, how I was planning to hide my diagnosis of BPD, which was so invalidating. I didn't really know, how to answer that. I didn't also understand the, stigma against mental health. And I always thought it was really funny because a month prior to that, at this job that I was at, a staff member had gone on leave from approximately a month, I think. And they had told us that they were, um, going to seek treatment for alcohol, that they were going to check into a center. And of course we were extremely supportive, and allowed them to do what they had to do. And the head of HR was was the one communicating with them. She told me, like, I'll handle this, and which I was, of course. And yeah, that never they ne- the- she never asked her about any, how are you going to hide your alcoholism? Like, it was a very different approach, someone who was just left. And and it's and I don't want to dismiss what that person went through, but there was never any formal anything handed in. She just sent me a text message saying what she was doing, and that was it. And there was never, I always, after the fact, especially after the way I was treated, I kind of questioned, like, did that person really go a month away for treatment, or did they go on a holiday? We don't know, because they just sent a text message and that was it. There were, I provided a diagnosis from a doctor, and it was met with this, well, so how are you going to hide that? and it was very frustrating and very invalidating. And so I decided to take a leave from the role, from the job, and try to focus on myself, on regulating my emotions, on my relationship with my family, with my wife, with my children, and try to um, get the help that I needed. And that was going to group with the BPD society. And it was, at that time, it was one group. It was biweekly in person, and then the other weeks it was online. And you know, my wife was always made sure that Wednesday night I was there. She would work around her schedule to make sure that I was there every day. And hearing other people, being in a room that where validation was such a thing, felt odd to me. I didn't know how to react to it um, when people would say that, like they would validate you. It was very strange to me, and I mean, quite frankly, still is. But I'm learning to accept it more. I'm learning to give it more. And I'm learning to open up my heart more, and that comes from being in going to group every Wednesday. And that was about 2 years ago that I've been going and doing work with my counselors, with my therapist. A while, I believe last year, so back in 2024, I went to the weekly DBT skills group that the society puts together, and was blown away by how much um, it was a 24-week program, and was blown away by how much I learned and how much I was learning from that and gaining from that. And then at the end, the person that was leading the facility, the group said, so was kind of talking about, so what have you learned and what are you going to take away from this and this and that. And I started to kind of be like, I have so much more to learn. What? I feel like I've learned so much, but yet, I'm rewiring my brain to be um to be different, to be better, essentially. And with that, I was very much in a state of like, well, I've learned so much, but yet all I've learned is that I feel like I need to learn more. Um, so thankful for the society to be able to kind of offer that course. I've signed up again because I want to I want to continue my learning path. I'm also thankful for my wife, who really was able to um, support me financially, but also support me in terms of giving me space. She was always there to encourage me. I think when I was on leave from that job, from that last job, it was kind of coming up to a time where I had to make a decision on whether I was going to go back or not go back. And I definitely didn't want to go back, especially after that horrible, invalidating experience. And ultimately, I made the decision not to go back, and was kind of working odd jobs here and there just to kind of go earn an income and do what I can. And suddenly found a role for me where I run sports based programming for children. And it is the most rewarding thing I could ever do. Getting to be around children daily and getting to play sports. I mean, I love sports, and teaching them, the different sports that are on offer, not just the stereotypical soccer and hockey. We also do badminton and tennis and things like that, lacrosse, what have you. It's amazing. And I had a parent who I ran into, and she's was like, "Oh, like, how are you doing, Josh? What are you doing?" And I shared with her what I was doing now, and she's like, "I'm so happy for you. Like, that sounds really great and really awesome." And a lot of that has to do with being involved with the society, going to group, listening to other people's stories, sharing myself, which is not which is not easy. And having the tough conversations with myself, and allowing myself to open up, to be to to really try and discover who I am. I feel as I'm 37 now, and I feel within these last 2 years, I'm finally starting to become who I am. So yeah, it's an exciting time for me, and I'm truly grateful, to the society, truly grateful to Deb, to Ryan, to Bailey, for the work that they do, and of course all the other volunteers with the society, because there isn't um, much in terms of support, and having kind of been through the system a little bit, and I only say a little bit. I mean, it's the society and the volunteers are extremely important, and I'm forever grateful for all of them. So thank you so much for your time. I'm really grateful for this space, and I'm really grateful for you all for listening.
Thank you so much, Josh. I remember we met like a couple years ago. I think it was probably, you said 2 years ago now. And I just have always thought that you were an amazing person. And I think that that's why I was like, yeah, we got to get Josh on board to do the facilitation at the group. And I know that people really appreciate your presence. Um, and so thank you. Thank you too. Yeah. Yeah. And if anyone has any questions for Josh or any comments, compliments about his story of lived experience, you're welcome to put that in the chat. I think people are probably fading at this point because it's like, we've had some lifers here for 6 hours. So, so far there's no questions in the chat. But we do have our closing interactive activity after this that we all need people's support with to write. If you've ever been here before, we ask a question and then we put all the answers on a sheet, like a blue sheet, like our color. And then we post it online afterwards to show like what the whole community thinks about for example, this year is what has been the most helpful in your healing journey. So um, that could be something. It was one question I was actually going to ask you, Josh, is what has been most helpful in your journey?
For me, it's been the DBT skills. I think that has allowed me to help navigate my day to day. I find day to day, there's always a trigger, there's always something, and the DBT has a lot. The DBT skills has allowed me to help regulate my emotions and really understand: is it something that's happening now, or is this something that's triggering me from my unresolved past? And really allow me to kind of assess how I should approach the moment now. So many times there's been in when now that I've been with going to group and gone through therapy and things like that, I'm taking stock of past experiences, and I always there was one I remember being in high school where there was this girlfriend and she broke up with me. We dated for like a very short time, and I remember, and I remember just being like, "Why would you break up with me? Oh my gosh!" and this and that. And she said like, and I'm always thankful that she shared it was that you were suffocating me. And I was like, at the time, was like, "What are you talking about?" But realizing now, having gone to skills, is that she was my favorite person, and I was suffocating her, and I didn't understand that, right? I think I was, I don't know, maybe 17, 16. I forget how old I was, but and you can't help but just think about all those. I can't help but think about all those relationships that I, you know, did probably was suffocating people because of, and I didn't even know that. And but that to me, the DBT skills has really opened my mind to understanding relationships more, not just with my wife, but with work colleagues, as well as friendships.
Great. Yeah. Yeah. And I don't think you're alone in hearing that in your life. I've heard that a few times too. So, yeah. And I also appreciate like when you say that the DBT isn't always enough, right? Like for me, when I did DBT, I mean, the research, first of all, shows that doing them for a full 12 months or doing them twice for a full 12 months can be the most effective. And then also for standard DBT specifically. And then for me personally, like I did do the standard DBT where I did like the individual, the group, the skills coaching all together. And then after that year, I went on to do a little bit of steps, which is like the complementary
Mhm.
um, program that Connor had mentioned earlier. And then I found that there was, yeah, still more to do. Like it was like peeling the layers of the onion. And for me, that was trauma counseling. Like that's something that I notice as a DBT clinician too, is that I notice that people after doing DBT, whether it be 6 months or 12 months or whatever it may be, after doing a round, couple of rounds, that there's usually, not always, we know that's not always the case for people, but oftentimes people have trauma. And so underneath that, there's on top of these skills, the skills are there for like putting out the fires, the substance use, the self-injury, suicidal ideation, relationship difficulties and such. And then like if there's still some of those symptoms left over, I found it really helpful to go to trauma counseling, whether that be, somatic experiencing, EMDR, IFS, like whatever it is that kind of resonates and works for a person. I really needed that for myself. So yeah, I don't think you're alone in that either. Yeah.
No, absolutely, yeah, and I know a lot of that was centered around my mother, who who lived in Toronto for and but moved here in 2024. Yeah, March of 2024. And and that was kind of like, so that was, I thought I was really good. And then she moved here where she was physically closer to us, and it
Mm.
brought up so much for me. And suddenly it was just like, it was that trauma, that unresolved trauma that she experienced, and that I experienced, and that we never spoke about. So we were very so going through that it's opened my eyes to that. It's like I just still have more work to do.
I think we're always evolving as humans, right? And doing
Exactly,
the work
exactly.
is lifelong. Yeah.
Yeah,
Just a
exactly.
final question for me is that I'm wondering what you're looking forward to, like in the future, as like a human being, but also as a person with BPD. Like, is there anything you're looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to being able to enjoy the moments, in and as they are. I find myself, when I would think about myself previously in previous years, I would have a moment happen and I would think of either the past, or I would think of what does that person mean, or da, da, da. and in and the moment was just lost. So I think that's what
Mm.
someone with BPD is. I want to be able to experience the moment for what it is in the moment. I think that's
The
something that
future is now.
exactly, the future is now. And so that's what that's something that I'm excited about, and something that I experience every now and then, not all the time, but every now and then.
Great. Wonderful. Well, it was really nice to hear your story. I don't think I've heard your full story before. And so it was really beautiful to hear. And I'm sure we'll see each other again soon at the Victoria group. And now we're going to go into our last closing interactive activity for the day. And I hope you have a wonderful evening, Josh.
Thank you, Bailey.